Woohoo! And we're live once again on another Tuesday, but technically we're not live because we are previously recording this only so that I didn't have to get Michelle J. Raymond up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do this live.
I
So
do love you, but people won't love me at 4 a.m. Like I can't be this pretty at 4 a.m. I'm just putting it out there.
that's right. That's right. And it's funny, this time last year, we were doing an audio podcast. And then this year, I went, no, 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 I want you on my show live. So we're just going to go for it and do our recording. So I'm so excited you're here. So before we get stuck in, I'm going to go ahead and flip up the banner so everybody knows what we're talking about today, which is Writing Without Borders, how two books spanned 3 countries. And this is going to be a fabulous, fabulous chat. Yay! She's got him there. She's got him there. She's got him there. So before we kind of dive in, Michelle, can you please just tell people who you are and what you do, and then we'll get stuck in.
Of course I can. So I'm Michelle J. Raymond. If you can't tell by the accent, I'm based here in Sydney, Australia, and I am a LinkedIn trainer that specializes in all things company pages, but also teaching other people how to leverage LinkedIn to grow their business. So I'm all about how do you actually spend time that's efficient and effective to generate the dollars. Otherwise, it's just a hobby, right? So that's what I love, and I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation because almost say I'm an accidental author 2 times over. Whoops, how did that happen?
I love it. I love it. And it's funny, I was thinking about it and I thought, you have 2 books, but it's almost like you got 3 books. And so we'll leave it to that to people to figure out what that means, except for the fact that I know I have done 3 book launches for you. And I'm just kind of bracing myself. What's next? What's next? Because there's always something next come your birthday. So we won't get into that. But anyways, why don't we kind of like roll back in time with book number 1? So book number 1, hold it up, would be Business Gold, right?
Sure is.
Aha. Now, what is the story? So the wonderful thing about you, Michelle, is that you have collaborated with 2 authors. And so you are like the best person to talk about what the whole collaboration journey is about in writing a book. So can you kind of go back in our time machine and tell us, how did book number 1 even start?
It's crazy, but it is actually globally. I guess the global connections on LinkedIn is what made it possible. So if we rewind the clock 3.5, 4 years ago, I started talking about LinkedIn company pages. And at that point in time, nobody else was really talking about them. Pretty much everybody thought I was crazy. And I know we were friends back then, so you know the journey that I've been on. But what happened was I would go and see LinkedIn posts that were all about bashing company pages, that there was no point to them, rah, 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 rah. You get the gist. And so I would write comments, hey, what about if you think about it like this? Or maybe have you thought about that? And, almost be the contrarian, not for contrarian's sake, but because I honestly believe that there was an opportunity for businesses to really leverage these company pages. So on one particular day, I wrote a comment on a post of a friend of mine who was based in Vienna, right? So I'm in Australia, he's in Vienna. And then from there, somebody that was in Dubai saw that post and saw the comment and ran a podcast. And that person reached out to me and said, Michelle, would you like to come on my podcast? I saw you talking about company pages. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. At that stage, I was just so excited. Go on the podcast. And then, lo and behold, someone in New Zealand was listening to that podcast. Shout out to Lynette Johnston, listened to it. She reached out to me. So Lynette was somebody that I was not friends with. I knew she was another LinkedIn trainer. I was still finding my place in the world back then. So I wasn't really friends with anybody that I thought was like a competitor, which I've since, moved on from there. But we jumped on a Zoom call and she said, this is going to sound really weird. We're about 10 minutes in, got over the little chit chat. And she says, Michelle, I've got an idea to write a book on LinkedIn company pages and I want to write it with you. And I got to tell you, like my head just went, what the? Why would this person want me to write a book? I've never written a book. And then, the imposter syndrome kicks in and your brain goes into crazy places. And I said, but Linaire, I've never written a book. And she goes, It's okay. I have, and I know that you know company pages technically, and I need someone with your level of knowledge that can help do this. And what I'm really proud of is that I just said yes and figured I'd work it out with her along the way. I'm most proud that what we were able to do was take the best of what we were both good at and bring that together in one book. And it turns out that Lynette and I really work pretty much the same way. And we had a great, like, I loved writing the book with Lynette. Like, we would catch up every Friday with a cocktail in our hand just to check in where things were. And everything just worked really easily. So that's how book number one, and we've, kind of came around and it was a bestseller, the world's first and only book on company pages. And I'm really proud of myself for doing it. And yes, we did do a second edition later on, which thank you for always running the world's most amazing book launch parties on LinkedIn.
I love it. I love it. So you never met together. You would just do it on like a Zoom or something like that. And how did you actually physically write the book? Did you like go away and do one chapter, she do another? Like, how did that part happen?
The biggest challenge is when you've got two authors with two very different styles and personalities and experiences, how do you write a book that doesn't feel like two different people wrote it? And that
Mm,
was something that was really important to us. And as it turns out, because it's more of a how to style book, and a lot of it was stepping people through the kind of steps that a page admin should follow. And it was quite logical. So, from that perspective, it was pretty easy for us to do that. I said to Lynette, look, I'm not great with planning. Like, that is not my skill set. But if you tell me what to do, I respond very well to instructions. So in this particular case, I'm not the expert. So I'll defer to you and I'll just go along for the ride. You tell me what. And she said, well, I've got the overview. Here's what we'll do. We'll divide up the chapters. And it became kind of obvious what things I was more interested in or maybe had more knowledge on. There were things that Lynette was passionate about that she wanted to own those particular chapters. So we roughly worked out even Stevens. I would have to say it was one of those collaborations that literally was 50-50. It wasn't
mm.
either of us never walked away and went, I did more than you, or, anything crazy like that, which, there is a risk that when you don't know somebody and you agree to write a book, that could have blown up in both of our faces. Like,
Yes.
it
Yes.
really could have. So I'm so grateful for everything that she taught me during that process, and that it was just such an amazing experience. And
Mm.
to have it out there and have a bestseller, like, yeah, I mean, how cool is that?
And it's nice that it was like a bestseller for you right out of the gate, because there is something so amazing when you look on Amazon and it's like, woo, I made it. I'm at the top. And it's like sometimes it can be fleeting, but it's enough for a screenshot and you made it. And it's awesome. It's
Because
absolutely awesome.
we spent probably 9 months writing that book together because we were still running our businesses, doing our client work and life, somewhere in amongst that. And, when you dedicate that much time to it, by the time it's about to go live, like, oh my God, I felt like I wanted to vomit a lot of times because I was so nervous. What will people think? How will they judge this? Is it everything that I wish I'd put in there? What things, and last minute, I wish I could put this in. I wish I could put that in. And stopping yourself from doing that and just being really clear around, no, this will help people because there wasn't any other resources. And yeah, so that was a bit of a moment when it goes live and you get that first delivery of the book and you can hold it in your hands. Like, that's a pretty cool feeling.
That's wonderful. And I have to say, it's a great book and it was so well needed. And purely lives up to its name. It's business gold. So tick. You did that one wonderfully. And it's wonderful that Lanier had already been an author. She had already done her own book. So it's like you got to learn while doing, which I think is actually how you actually run with life. So I think you wouldn't have really wanted to have, let me just go take a course and then I'll learn how to do it. I think you're the kind of person that's just like, let me jump in, but it's really nice to have somebody that's actually, done that sort of thing. And as you said, you must choose your collaborators wisely in that you want to make sure that, you you complement each other, or if one is lacking, the other one has that super skill that you can bring it all together. So I commend you for that. That was great. So, okay. Now we go on to book number 2. Why don't you go ahead and put that one up? The LinkedIn branding book, the pinkest book I know. I love this book. Matches your shoes. And so with this book, not Lanier, not New Zealand. What's this story?
We are going to fly over to Florida this time. So, more in your part of the world. So, shout out to Michelle Griffin, our common friends. So, this one happened a little bit differently. So, again, I had no plans of writing a book. So, no plans to write the first one, no plans to write the second one. Michelle and I were, extremely good friends who knew each other really well, had been friends for quite a, while by the time this book came around. And Michelle said to me, "Oh, it's always been on my bucket list to write a book. Will you write one with me?" Because she knew that I'd written the one with Lanier, it had been successful, and same thing, reach back, help someone else, lift them up. And I said, "Yeah, sure. What will we write it on?" And, the LinkedIn branding book was born, and it was a completely different experience. So I naively thought, take the process that I'd done with Lanier that worked so well for us, bring it across for Michelle and I, so the power of Michelle squared, and everything would be easy. The whole process would be easy because I knew Michelle better, and away we went. Except we found out very quickly that we don't work the same. And where Lanier and I did, Michelle and I were almost opposites in how our brains work. So I'm a dive in the deep end, just get it done kind of person. Michelle is a planner. And, we talk about this on the LinkedIn Branding Show podcast weekly. This is not new to either of us, but we discovered it even more so when we were writing this book. And so we wrote a chunk of it and then went, this book's rubbish. And Michelle kept saying, I don't know what's going on. And I'm like getting frustrated because we're not doing, when we don't seem to be, getting anywhere. And we literally just both said to each other, this is not the book that we need to write. Like time out. Let's call time out. Let's go back and go back to the drawing board and figure out, what is this book? Why are we doing it? Rather than just tick, we wrote a book. I don't recommend that to everybody. And we had to find a new way for her and I to work together that would work for both of us. And so it was little things. I work on Microsoft OneDrive or Dropbox. Michelle's a Google person, right? So you don't think that working on Google Drive versus, like Microsoft is really going to cause that much of an issue. But it was little things like that can come up that you can all of a sudden realize it becomes a thing, and you can argue about the thing or you can find a solution to it. And as long as you're both committed to finding a solution, you're good. But it could have blown up and thrown the whole thing away many occasions, but we were just so committed to helping others. So, finding a system that worked for us. And so what we worked out, and this is how we describe it, you'll love it because both of us so well, is that Michelle would draw, basically one of us would draw the plans for the house and the other one would decorate it. So Michelle would need the plans and to build the walls, or, one of us would build the walls and the other one would come in and decorate it, so that we knew that this is where we're going, this is what we're trying to do. And then we were able to do it after that and, come up with a framework and, all the other fun stuff that we did. But it was hard, I thought it'd be a breeze like the first book, and it wasn't. I'm again so proud of what we put out because I know how much, again, 9 months of our life and, how much effort. But yeah, it certainly wasn't just as easy as the first one. I thought it was just going to be easy, Jillian. Turns out, nope, it's
Nope.
not.
Nope. And it's funny that you said 9 months, because like having a book is like kind of having a baby. And it's the same thing, that it's like there's a lot of work, there's a lot of toil. And I know, like being a mother of 2 children myself, you think your second child is going to be a carbon copy of the first one. And it's like, no, never. And I think that's the same with anything we do in life, second spouses, whatever. It's never a carbon copy. Everything is always different. And you have to be able to go, how am I going to roll with this? And I really commend you that you guys could get that far in the process and just say, mm, fall back, regroup, going back to square one. That must have been really hard because, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. It's like you had to start again. So how, if you could kind of go back and, whatever happens in life, but if somebody else, what could you advise if you'd known now what if you'd known then what you know now, what could have saved you that work?
I think it would have been a lot more planning in the beginning, and I was probably blessed with what Lanier had done in the first one because I just kind of walked in and just had to write, and just, we kind of skipped over the planning section in my side of it because it had all been done. I kind of handed it off. And so I think you have to be really good at communication. You have to be committed to the project, which is bigger than committing to being right about, and being hell bent on it's my way or the highway. If you don't compromise, you won't get anywhere. And I just kept saying to Michelle, look, these, to use the analogy, and this is what I would say to her, it is like having a baby. You're going through the morning sickness, you're going through all the aches and pains and can't sleep. And then one day you have the baby and you forget about all of that. And that is literally what happened with the book, because, one of the examples that we say is that, it was a couple of weeks before we were going to go live and get this thing published. And the process of getting books published, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. And Michelle says, I want to do a workbook. And I was like, we haven't even finished editing this thing. I was like, no way. Like, because by this stage, I'm like deadlines, like, come on, we said we're getting this out on my birthday. It is happening. Like, we can't push the editors, copywriters, blah, blah, blah. No, we're not doing it. She's like, no, we really need to do this. And I was like, I can't do that and all the other things I need to do to get this done. And it was something that we could have easily at the finish line just, blown up. But she was passionate about it and I could see the value. And then what we had to do was just split up and say, okay, well, you own that. I will contribute when you've done most of it. And I'll own this part, which is the copywriting and editing and getting it ready for actual launch. And then we'll come back and make sure that the final product's great. And I'm so glad that she did push for it because it is such an amazing tool that comes with the book that people love. And it's so helpful and it really just finishes off the whole thing. But yeah, if you don't sit down and do the planning in the beginning, and just because someone's written a book either by themselves or with someone else before, that doesn't mean it's going to be the same process. In fact, it absolutely will not be the same process the second time around. But yeah, being mindful and respectful and just willing to compromise is a non-negotiable in this process. And the way that we did it is we just knew that this book was going to help a lot of people, and that was more important than either of us. And yeah, so we got there in the end.
I love it. I love it. And you're both wonderful women. And I couldn't imagine the book. And, and it's so funny. It's like the fact that you even have the same name is just like so amazing that Michelle squared, you kind of just leaned in and it ran with it. But I also want to ask you, where did the podcast fit in? Because you also had a podcast. So was the podcast before the book, or it's like the chicken and the egg? What came first, the podcast, the book, the podcast?
Yeah, it was really funny because Michelle was part of the LinkedIn creator program. And so she'd been given access to LinkedIn audio rooms back in the day. And she said, oh, Michelle, do you want to do an audio room and we'll just trial it? And I was like, oh, I'm not really into that, but yeah, whatever. Again, if it'll help you go, like, yeah, let's go and give it a try. And I didn't like it because I love LinkedIn Lives. Like, I'm like you, I'm on Team LinkedIn Live. And the thought of an audio being done and then disappearing, I could never wrap my head around it. And to this day, I still can't wrap my head around that, kind of piece of it. And so we started to do that, which then turned into I don't want to lose it. Why don't we do this as a podcast instead of doing that? And we're only a few episodes into the LinkedIn branding show when we went, you know what, maybe if we do episodes chapter by chapter about what we would talk about in a book, then what we could do is come back and include links to the podcast in the book. So there are, and of course, as I scroll through, there are QR codes in this book, which take people back to our podcast. And for me, that was part of how can you go more in depth. There are people that don't like to read, they prefer listening. We haven't done an audiobook version. I had a lot of people ask about it, but not enough to kind of justify the expense in my mind at that point in time. Because, these things do take money and time, and, you got to weigh up where's the best use of all of these resources. And so, getting that out there, having the LinkedIn branding show is almost how we promote the book ongoing. Because I don't think, I'm going to put it out there, Gillian, for both of these books, we never had a strategy on how you promote the book after the launch. So there's this big spike in sales on the first week or couple of weeks, and everyone's excited and all your friends are buying it, and you see your Amazon bestseller status and you think, oh, I'm so amazing. This is just going to keep going forever. And then, month one goes, down it goes, and you have to keep talking about it. And I realized even recently, so these books have been out for a few years. I did a post not that long ago, a poll, did people know that I'd written both books? And I had people who I'm close, well, what I think are my LinkedIn friends, go, do you have two books? I was like,
Mm.
oh dear Lord. I've even written a second edition of one of those books. And that's how much someone like me realized you have to keep promoting. So it's a definite lesson from both of those things. It's not just writing it, because you can write it and then it never sells and it doesn't help the people that you want to sell. So yeah, it's still, if I was to go back and wave a wand and say, what would I learn? Have a plan for that ongoing marketing as well.
That's brilliant, and I think that's probably something that holds a lot of people back because they kind of feel, "I don't wanna be bragging, I feel like I'm bragging, I'm too salesy by telling people about the book," but the thing is that you're not cold selling to everybody, you're basically telling people, "Here's a resource, and it's either gonna fit for you or it's not gonna fit for you, and who knows what they're looking for," so if you don't tell them about it. They don't have the opportunity to say yes or no.
Yeah. And you're always getting new connections and followers on LinkedIn. They're coming in at all different points of this conversation. If we weren't connected 4 years ago or 3 years ago, then you don't know that I've got these books if I'm not reminding it. So I do things now where I plan some posts on my company page around the books to remind people, hey, these resources are there, almost to remind me as well to talk
Mm,
about it. But also my LinkedIn newsletter, if I'm talking about company pages, I always put a picture of the book and a link to it so people know
mm,
that that resource is there. And it's not something I think I've still got a lot of way to go. And I think if I was to go back and, maybe write a book by myself, it would be a bit different. It would probably have, my own framework that would tie to how I would do training and aligned with other products. What I would say, these books are standalone books and they help build my authority. So when I'm sitting in a customer call, with a new potential client, then I go, yeah, I wrote the world's first and only book on company pages. That gives me so much authority and credibility, but it's not something that I sell tied to a product as such, like on my own framework. So, there's things that I've learned in hindsight that I could take into the next project, which, just putting it out there, I'm not doing a book this year on my birthday, as much it is killing me to break the tradition of launching books on my birthday three
well, I
years in a
do.
row. The thing is that I just realized they're a big commitment, right? So it takes, like I said, 9 months or so for these books. And I think if I was to write one by myself, it'd take me even longer because, I'm not accountable to myself, Gillian. I'm horrendous at it. I got these books done because I was working with someone else. Doing it by myself, I don't think I would have ever written a book, so we've got to pick our battles on that. But um, yeah, for me, it was I have to refine things in my business. So there's a right time and a right place, and doing it just because isn't a good strategy. Again, something that I wouldn't recommend back in hindsight. Love the books, love the opportunity to work with two amazing people, but yeah, in hindsight, was it the right time? I don't know. Like you can't go back and change things. So, but yeah, just be mindful that it's a big commitment.
Mm, mm. So I guess then the one question I'd kind of leave you with is, or ask you sort of as we're wrapping up, would be if somebody was thinking about collaborating, is this a good way to start your author journey? And sort of who should they look to doing this with if somebody was listening to us today and kind of wanted some advice?
I'm a huge fan of collaborations. I would not be where I am today without collaborations of all kinds, whether it's showing up on, LinkedIn Lives like this one, or whether it's being a podcast guest or working with people in the background. Like it, I just know I wouldn't be where I am without those. So you can leverage each other's communities, you can complement each other's skills. So the great thing about Michelle and I is that we did come from things so opposite. And as it turns out, that's what made a great book, because we shared our stories about Michelle was the perfectionist planner, and procrastinated for so long. And I was the diving in the deep end with the sharks. Like that's who we are as people. And that's when people read the book, they can see both of those sides. With Linaire, it was completely the opposite. We were both aligned and logical, and it was all easy and on the same page. And so I don't know that there's a right or a wrong person to write it with. I think if you like the person, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them, I think check that you align with their values. And you can see a lot of that through people's content. I don't think you have to be the same, but I think you have to be committed to the same outcomes as something bigger than yourself. And,
Mm.
Writing a book is a privilege. It's amazing to have your thoughts out there that are helping other people. For us, it was always, we wanted to help people on a global scale with both of those books for resources that weren't available to people. Like the LinkedIn branding book was written for the people we were when we started our business, the lessons we wish we'd learned, and we were just sharing it with others. The company page one was the world's first and only resource for people that, and people love to read books to learn. And so, having them out there is amazing, but choosing the right partner, communication, commitment to the outcomes for other people, and yeah, having that true collaborative spirit where you are creating something together. And you have to compromise, because there are parts of those books I don't like them, right? I wouldn't have written them like the others wrote. And that goes both ways. I'm sure that there are parts of the books where they kind of go, oh, Michelle, why did you write that like that? Or, like Michelle and I had to work out, I had to write a whole book in US English instead of UK English. So, and
Ooh.
and we discovered that I always use the word whilst. And she's like, what are you saying, Michelle? It's like a word that I use that doesn't get used in the US. And so, there were things that I was like, oh, we've got to work this out. So yeah, it's just bigger than yourself. And I think that's probably the most important lesson.
Wonderful. And so since the collaborations, have you ever met Lanier in person?
I haven't. I've only met Michelle in New Orleans earlier this year, which is amazing. Like, and I will get to Linaire. She's much closer, which is kind of crazy, just in New Zealand. So shout out to her when she watches this back. But ultimately, I can't wait, because I did send her a bottle of vodka to celebrate, after we'd finished a local distillery here, which is a funny story in itself, which I'll save for another day. But ultimately, I think you become closer. We become, friends from this. We are going to be updating Business Gold again before March, just because so much has changed in company pages, and I'm speaking at social media marketing world, and we like to give these away as gifts. Books are great when you're a speaker to, leave a little. They're almost like my business card that I leave on chairs as gifts for people and create those
Mhm.
memorable moments. So there's lots of cool things, but yeah, I hope that I get to meet her sooner rather than later, because I feel like we just know each other so well, and I can't wait to see her garden. I will make the effort to go and see her garden.
I love that. I love that. Okay, great. So I think I can't really see my clock, but I think we're getting close to 30 minutes. And so any final words of wisdom you want to share before we say goodbye to everybody today?
I think the last thing that I want to share with people is it really is something that you can be proud of when you get to the end and you get that book out there, and it does have the impacts on other people, And that is an amazing experience that you will never know. I remember, I'll just share a very quick story before we wrap up, but I went to Social Media Marketing World in San Diego. I'd given some books out to people earlier in the day, and I was sitting at a talk waiting to watch Andy Crestodina talk, and someone came up and said, "Oh, Michelle, can you sign this book?" And I was really embarrassed because the person I was talking to, I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like this is my book." And he goes, "Is that the pink book?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Did you write that book?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I just read that on the plane over here from the UK." And I was like, "What?" So you never know where these books are going to land and the people who will buy them. And it is just magical to know that it is doing the things that you wish. So, the things you go along the way, you will definitely forget the labor pains. You'll just see the pretty little shiny baby that you fall in love with. So hang in there.
I love that. That's a wonderful story. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for everybody who's watching us on the replay. And thank you to everybody who is tuning into the podcast. So join us again next week. And thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.